Hey everyone, welcome back to Cults to Consciousness for another culty news. So, this one's going to be a little bit different. We are talking about a news story that was just recently published. It happened a couple years ago, but it's recently resurfaced. And we are going to be doubling that with an interview with the people who it's actually about today. So, I am joined today by Ashley and Jared Jones. Thanks so much for being here.
Hi,
Hi.
thanks for having us.
Yeah, of course. So we covered your story briefly because it was in the Daily Mail article, and Jonathan and I did a live where we were covering a few different stories within mainstream Mormonism and how they've been mishandling CSA and SA within the church. And your story particularly got me. I was like, wow, this is really awful. It needs to be heard, it needs to be broadcast. And then when I was doing a live with Kara slash Nuato, she was like, oh yeah, I know them. And I was like, what? And so I'm so happy that she connected us. And I'm really looking forward to hearing a more in-depth version of your story today. So thanks for being willing to come on and share with us, because I know it can be hard. And I mean, you've done it before. You've done it on Mormon Stories, which we've linked in the description, and RFM. So thank you again for being here.
Our pleasure.
Yeah. So I think Kara's even in the chat. Hey, Kara, shout out to Kara. All right, so let's just get right into it. Before we start, though, let's just do a quick trigger warning for anyone who is sensitive to CSA. We will be speaking about the youth in that way and abbreviating as much as we can for the algorithm so we don't get flagged. But yeah, let's just dive into it. So, you guys are in Riverside, California, and a CSA case was mishandled by your bishop and all the way up to the top of the church. So I guess I'll just leave it up to you where you want to start.
Yeah. I think that we'll start. I think Ashley can just kind of talk about what happened, like how we found out about the abuse, and then also like take it up to the point where the church leaders started coming in and trying to correct us.
Where should we start?
Okay.
March?
Yeah, I think that makes most sense.
Yeah. So we found out the first week of March 2021 because the perpetrator's dad had given Jared a phone call and just talked about how his son had confessed to touching our 3-year-old daughter at the time, and really tried to like play it off like, he's, like just my son really needs to get forgiven for this so he can pass the sacrament again. So, I just need to make sure I tell you this. Later, we did find out he only told us because the police officers found out he hadn't told us yet. So he only called us because he had to.
So this was like an aside. He was like, I just need my son to be able to pass the sacrament. So he was 13, right? 12 or 13?
Yeah, I mean, he had just turned 13 when we found out. He would have been technically still 12, I think, at the time of
right, when it happened.
Yeah.
Wow. So he's just kind of playing it off like an AA step. Like, I just got to talk to you so that I can move on to the next thing. And you're going, I'm sorry, what?
And then like the next, it took us a day or so to kind of process that, like what that meant, because he made it sound like it was just a little thing, like, don't worry about it. And the next night, we kind of thought about like, I thought there was another family that lived down the street from them that kind of hung out a little bit. And so I had messaged her on like Facebook or something like, hey, have you heard about the rumors about this kid? Because there were some rumors going on a couple months before that he had done something to another kid who used to be in our ward. But no one told anybody that. It was just kind of like the mom had told some people, like the first victim had been spreading stuff. That's what we heard, kind of. And so I messaged this other mom on Facebook, and she was like, oh my gosh, can you call us right now? We got the same phone call from this dad. And so we found out that their 3-year-old son at the time had also been abused by this boy a few months earlier.
Wow. I can't even imagine what that must have felt like to get a phone call like that. And then to find out that you're one of many that this kid had been abusing. And I think something that I want to highlight here, and correct me if I get the details wrong, but this confession, he confessed to a bishop, or his dad confessed to a bishop, but nobody told the parents who were involved, whose
So
children were involved.
the week or two before, this kid had been sitting in front of our daughter at church, and the bishop already knew he had confessed to abusing her, but we had no idea. So we're sitting behind him in church, and him and the stake president all know about it, and we had no idea. We're just sitting behind this guy who had touched our daughter.
And literally, like, we're directly behind, so we're like 18 inches away. Our daughter is 18 inches away from her abuser, and
the other kid that we found out was also in the ward as well. And so they're just there, like, seeing this kid. We don't know what they know.
Yeah. So do you think the bishop also just downplayed the extent of it? I mean, if he talked to the stake president, he obviously knew that it was serious, but I just want to figure out why he didn't feel the need to notify you guys, because that's something that you should obviously know about.
Yeah, I mean, here's one of the major concerns that I have with the way that the Mormon Church deals with sexual abuse. Like, one of the things that's different, like when you talk about penitent privilege and whatnot, like I listened to the episode with Kobe last night, like it was really built for like that Catholic priest, right? Mm-hmm. Who has taken on the confessional, like, and they take these things to their grave. That's not what happens in Mormonism. Like, you're confessing to some dude that pops your back, right? Like, or cleans your teeth. Like, these are the people that you're confessing to, and
they don't know what they're doing.
Right. They're just randos, but also they're your friends.
Yeah. So, I mean, the perpetrator's dad was in the bishopric with the bishop and had been in the bishopric with the stake president. Now he's the stake president at the time. They all hang out together. Like, they don't want to make a big deal for their friend.
Okay.
And they actually found out about a first victim in January. So they knew he already was a perpetrator back in January. So for 2 months, he was allowed to be at church. We had church at our house for a while because it was COVID. We had mutual at our house. He's running around with youth and like little kids who brought their kids, youth leaders who brought their kids. Like, they knew all about this, and they still just let him run around, be at church. No one knew anything. Like, leaders didn't know to watch out for him.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And so, but, to the question of, did the bishop diminish the abuse? I mean, the answer is, do I think that the bishop had a clear understanding of what all of it was / good judgment surrounding that? Maybe not. Like, how well do we judge ourselves? How well do we judge our kids? How well do we judge our spouse? And when we know what their heart is or their intent.
And he heard about it from the perpetrator's dad, who I'm sure made it sound not as bad as it probably.
Yeah.
He found out later, there's more victims as well. He didn't know that many at the time, but.
Yeah. And so, like, that, therein lies the conflict, right? Like, you've got your stake president who, dad was in the bishopric of his when he was the bishop of the ward. Then he becomes the stake president, and the new bishop calls the dad to be in his bishopric as well. So,
and they all live, in the same area. They have dinner parties and stuff. Like,
they have a dinner party running for 13 years straight, once a month, with that whole group, with bishop, stake president, and perpetrator's family. Like, and so, like, the closeness.
They shouldn't have been responsible for that. There's a conflict of interest, definitely, at least in our case.
And the hard thing is, I'm not a big fan of any of these people. I'm not going to say that, like, I think that they're super awesome guys. Like, I don't actually think that, but I also don't think they're the devil either, right? Like, I don't think these are super bad people.
Was caught up in a bad situation that they didn't know what.
Sure.
Yeah.
And so, listening to church leaders who also were trying to cover their own butts at the time.
Yeah. And so, like, as this rolls forward, we find out about this, like, you can just kind of go from there.
Yeah. So and a couple days later was Sunday. And, we were kind of concerned that, hey, like, the victims in the ward shouldn't have to see this kid at church, at least until we figure out what's going on. Like,
right.
And, Jared had talked to the bishop and stake president, and they both really said, no, we can't tell anybody not to come to church. Like, we don't really care. Like, we can't do anything about it. And I talked to like I was in the primary presidency at the time, and we talked about it, and it was our first Sunday back to church after COVID, like starting primary. And they all said, hey, we are not going to have classes like if he's going to be walking around church. We don't want to be responsible for the primary kids with this kid walking around church. And eventually there was enough pressure, the dad just didn't bring him. So it worked out, but it took a lot of peer pressure.
Well, and to that as well, like, I think that one of the important parts of that, as well as when I called and talked to the bishop that morning, like I told him, it's like, hey, you know that you can tell these guys not to come to church, or this kid not to come to church, and he shouldn't be there. But more importantly than that, like, he should just not be there, right? Like, so you shouldn't even have to tell him not to be there. He just shouldn't be there. Either way, he's like, I can't tell him not to come. Like, we're not allowed to do that.
Well, his parents wanted him to come because they thought he should be there and be embarrassed, like to help them as part of his like being better.
Oh, geez. That's kind of even worse.
Be there in face of everybody.
Yeah.
Yikes.
And so
because they want the embarrassment of him not being able to pass the sacrament in order to make him feel extra sorry. Is that kind of where we're going with this? Like make him feel guilty and shameful, which of course there should be a healthy level of guilt for something like that, obviously, but
not expensive.
I don't know. Yeah, not at the expense of other kids. And also the public shaming thing I'm just against in general, but no, he shouldn't be around other kids.
Yeah, and so like when the bishop said that, I was like, hey, you know that's not true. You can tell him not to come to church. Like, that's your call. Like, you get to make that. You don't need to ask permission from anybody. But by the way, I already know that there's a legal thing that you can do it's like a no trespassing thing called a persona non grata. And I was the elders quorum president at the time. And so I was aware that Bishop had received a physical threats where somebody said that they were going to beat him up because they were mad about something a couple years earlier. And so my dad happens to be a private investigator and got involved and helped serve a persona non grata so that this dude didn't roll up to church anymore and wasn't welcome on church property. So this was just a threat of physical violence against the bishop, persona non grata, like right away, right?
Yeah, security at the door every week.
All right. Yeah. And so I was in charge of making sure that security happened at the door on both sides of the building every week. We had a sign-up sheet to make sure that nobody came in to beat up Bishop, right? Are you kidding me? And so you can do that for a proposed threat of physical violence on somebody that you're potentially equally matched with, right? Or something, I mean, that's neither here nor there. But the point is like, Bishop, you know that you can tell anybody that you'd want not to come to church. And this kid has already actually physically harmed people. He's already done things. Like, this isn't like a threat. He's got victims there. And so, but he said, no, I can't do it. And so I said, okay, well, cool. If you're not going to do that, then what I'm going to do is we've got an hour or 2 hours before church. I'm going to call every family that I'm aware of that has little kids, and I'm going to let them know about the sexual abuse. So that's what I'm going to do. And so he's like, well, I can't stop you from doing that. And I was like, cool. And then I called like 17 different families in the next hour and a half.
It's interesting. I know people keep saying, like, you just want to shame this kid. Like, you want to tell everybody. And it's like, it's not our fault that everyone knows about him. Like, they could have quiet if they wanted to by keeping him home. Or, I mean, later, well, I guess we can tell that story now, Miss Skinlon.
Yep.
Real quick before you do, I feel like that just triggered something in me that made me think the Mormon church doesn't know the difference between shame and accountability. So on one hand, they want this kid to come to church and be ashamed and be publicly embarrassed. On the other hand, they don't want to hold him accountable. So telling other parents that there is a potential threat has nothing to do with shame. It has everything to do with accountability and safety. And it seems like they aren't able to separate the two.
Yeah. 100%. Yeah. And so, like, as all of this goes down, one of the things that was important to us was that the bishop and the stake president, who had been like told about this, go through the proper procedure and report it. Like they
Yeah.
are mandated reporters, and there's a lot of confusion around this. And like ultimately, each state has different laws. In this scenario, they are required to mandated report because they did not find out directly from the perpetrator. They found out from his dad. And so,
So
and
that's the loophole that they're trying to get around.
no, so they are saying like at first, well, basically they called Kieran and McConkey multiple times, the helpline, right?
Yeah.
Helping cover the church's ass. Like that's what the
Yeah.
helpline does. But that being said, is they call the helpline tells them, no, you don't have to report. And so, and we have that in writing. So like they confirmed with us that was the case.
Well, I had multiple texts to the bishop and stake president saying like, hey, I know at this point it's already been reported to the police and everything, but like, can you throw me a bone here and show me that you care and just make a call, make your 2-minute call, make a report, just show me. And they wouldn't do it. Yeah.
And
So it had been reported by the police from somebody.
Right. And so one of the things,
the first victim's parents reported,
right,
and her like therapist, I guess,
right,
and then it reported by all the parents involved.
Okay, but the church said, nope, we're not doing that.
Right. And one of the things that I think people like kind of poke at me for sometimes, like mostly true believing members, right, is like, what does it matter if somebody already called? What does it matter if multiple people report? And you and I talked about this in preparation for this, but one of the important factors in requiring every person that touches a case to report on it is each person has a little bit different information or perspective that comes from their report, right? And so, like, if you put 15 reports together, it's more likely that you're going to get to the heart of the actual issue, right? And so, and also from like a muscle memory perspective, like bishop, stake president, just report every time. Do it. Just like every person that we talk to in the government about this, like there's like, hey, just so you know, we have to report because you've told us about this. Like,
I took my daughter to a therapist like after that, and they're like, do you have like a case number? Otherwise, I need to call right now. And so I found them the case number. Yes, already gave us, so they didn't have to call to, but everyone's just like right away. Like if you say anything, I got to call.
And so, like what we wanted, the exercise that we were looking for was we were looking for them to take care of victims over taking care of a perpetrator. Like,
yeah, obviously, right? That seems like bare minimum.
Yeah. And so that's what we wanted to see. And so we are empathetic to the plight of the lay priesthood leader, right? Like
they don't know anything. They're doing probably the best that they can, I guess.
And so, but as this is going forward and they're not responding the way that all the government entities are, finally.
I mean, really, like the worst. I mean, they were diminishing all the victims' families in this time and like wouldn't do anything like really accommodating to perpetrator's family.
Right. Yeah, they were. And so, but Ashley grew super tired. And honestly, what triggered it, and this is kind of funny, and I don't think we shared this.
I don't know what you're saying.
But no, I'm a real estate broker. I have a company that is local to our area, and we were hosting an event for clients that morning. Like I think we had the In-N-Out truck to our house or whatever. And when that event happened, after Ashley was super frustrated,
I texted Bishop and stake president that morning. I was like, hey, you guys, I'm going to give you one more chance. Like, can you do it for me? No. And they were super rude back. Like, no, we've already told you we're not going to do this. I have all the texts, like.
But then the stake president.
He showed up for free food.
Showed up at our event.
And he didn't say anything. He's like, hey, how are you guys doing? And I'm like, are you serious?
And so she was super mad, which legit,
It built
right?
up, yeah.
And so she posted on social media that day.
It was not super harsh necessarily towards them, but I had talked about how, like, we found out about this event, that happened to our kid. And like all of the government, all the CPS workers were super, super nice. Like they came, they gave us resources, all this stuff. And ultimately they did not prosecute for our daughter, but they did what they could with the little bit the law is. But that was like, but our local church leaders, like, they're not stepping up. We've had a horrible time with them. They won't call and report. Just like that, when we got.
Right. And they're not doing what they're supposed to do. And so that, like, that was the gist of that.
I mean, we're not like, I hate to say, like, we're kind of not like a low profile family in our ward. Like, people know who we get, like Jared's eldest quorum president, which is, you shouldn't get special treatment, but like,
I mean, look, we look at this all the time and think about, like, shoot, like, we are very privileged within the church, like, just within our society, even, like,
and so, man, how are people getting treated, like, who are like barely coming to church, or people like, don't really like, or like,
or that aren't white, right?
And
like,
so it's like, we're having to work so hard for this, like, we want to advocate for people who are just getting pushed aside, like.
Right. And so that was our thought. Like, as we're going through this, we're like, hey, if we can't have good success at this, like, what can like for other people? So we have to push. Like, that is important to us, like, from a what is right perspective. And so we start doing that. Ashley posts on social media. And
like a week later,
lo and behold,
there's an email that goes out to everybody in our ward. And by everybody, like 500 people who've never even been to our ward, people who haven't been for years, people who have no kids. And they talk about how victims' families are reporting that the church is not doing the right thing. They're not reporting, and they're saying how they're wrong. And so basically calling us liars and such. And the problem is, at this point, only like the handful of families with kids in our ward even know about this, which is fine.
Right.
But now, like, there's random old people like going, "What's going on here?" Like, like they made it something. Now everyone knows. We didn't do that. Like,
yeah, and so
they were getting mad at you for being public. Just by saying, hey, guys, I'm trying to hold you accountable. There's the accountability thing again.
And then
they come back and they're like, no, we did everything right. And by doing so, blasted it to people who had no idea what was going on. Now everyone knows. Whoops, that kind of backfired. And then what happens?
Well, and so, like, that, it's the area president that sends that email out, right? And so, like, most of these people have never even met the area president. Even the local local ward members have not met him. But now he's emailed everybody. But the interesting thing is, like, he made a email faux pas, and he didn't BCC people. So
anybody could respond.
Anybody could reply. And so I just hit him up and I say,
open.
Yeah. And I was like, hey, Kevin, here's the deal, dude. Like, you said something that's not true. Like, and you know that it's not true. And here's what all the issues are. And I put together a super long email back to him, telling him where he was misstepping.
And what was lying in that email.
Yeah, and what wasn't true. And I said, however, if you do not correct this and let everybody know that you're lying, like that you're wrong, then I am going to reply all. And I'm also going to be contacting the media to let them know what's going on. Like, so.
Yes, Jared.
You know, but
real quick, do you remember any of the things that he said that were not correct that you had to correct him on? I'm just curious as like what he's trying to whitewash or get rid of.
Well, I mean, he just said that they fully complied with the law.
So they had reported.
And the statements that were being made were untrue, and so basically that they had done all of their legally obligated reporting, which in the recant of the email, I actually happen to have that right here because
he did, well, one of the other victims' families' dads did actually reply all to the email and said that you guys are wrong. They're lying to you. And the stake president did it and was like, oh, I'm so sorry. Like, you feel that way. It went back and forth. Like, a few people did, reply to everything.
And this was his reply. Brothers and sisters of the Foothill Ward.
This is the corrected one.
Yeah, the corrected one.
And we did correct it enough where we let it go.
But it says, in addition to my previous email, I would like to clarify something. Well, upon hearing of abuse, the bishop and stake president did call the church abuse helpline in accordance with church policy. Let's see. They personally did not report to local civil authorities until March. However, family services did make a report to local civil authorities in January, as did other families. The bishop and stake president received guidance regarding the reporting requirements from the abuse helpline. They have also spoken with Child Protective Services for further information regarding reporting requirements. In the future, they will continue to seek guidance to comply with legal requirements in reporting abuse. Now,
continue to seek guidance from Salt Lake, from the helpline.
So in what he didn't realize in that too, there was a couple admissions, but the biggest admission is our abuse wasn't found out until March. So he said they reported in January. He's admitting that the only report that ever happened was for the first victim
in January.
So they didn't report.
And it wasn't the church. It was the therapist who called.
Yeah. And so all of this comes out after, but like he did come back and clarify. And so he does admit in that email, though, they didn't report anything till March, till after Ashley shamed them. That's when they reported. So
and then a month or so later, he confessed to another victim, and then they finally did actually, I think, call.
Yeah.
And actually make real reports that time after more.
Yeah. So
the next time that victim came out.
So it's all convoluted and messy, but the point is like the church's goal here is to not be embarrassed. Like that's the most important thing. And people, and Kobe said this last night, and I have a little bit different take than Kobe does on this, but in the same vein, like Kobe said that the reason that he thinks that the church cares so much about abuse is not the money. And I do agree with that. I'm not saying that I don't think they care about the money. They do. But he said because these leaders have been told their whole life that they're special, and so they can't in any way be wrong because in their mind, whatever they think in their head is coming from God. I do agree with that. I think it's a part of it. But I think what's a bigger part is this. They feign discernment, right? Like they have the ability to know what's right for our family, for the whole ward, who they call in a calling, like when somebody's repented or not repented, what their heart is, like all of that. So first of all, they need to make sure that people realize that they are receiving revelation from God, right? Like that's super, super important. Secondly, it's very, very important to them that people know that their mechanism, like their value proposition to the people, like them to the people in the church, is that they can forgive. Like anything can happen and they have the ability to forgive, right? If they don't have that power, if they can't forgive this piece of crap that's a child abuser, then like what's their good? Like what's their value? Like what good are they? And so I think that the value proposition that they have to the members is, yes, we know more than you do, like because God's got a special like connection with us, but then also like we have the ability to help you get back to God, right? Like we have. And so keeping that awareness like around what their value proposition is, I think is the most important thing. And so I do think that Kieran McConkie, I don't think they care about that. I
Well,
don't.
no, they're lawyers, right?
They're
They
lawyers.
care about
And
the bottom
so,
line.
yeah. And so their job is to protect their client. But that's not revelation, right? Like um, that's not about protecting children. Like calling it the helpline is BS. Like, I just, it's so frustrating to me. The church, and Kobe said this last night too. Again, like the church looks like a PR firm. Like their responses, the way that they word things, like I guarantee you that his response email was run through Kieran McConkey. I
Yeah.
guarantee you that his email that was sent out to us was written through Kieran McConkey, as well as many of the communications that we had with our bishop and our stake president. And that feels gross to me, right? Like they're not in those scenarios, they are not concerned about what happens to our family. One of the things that I think is astounding is they are trying, like from the 30,000-foot view, it looks like they are trying to preserve the membership of the perpetrator and not the families.
So that's
Like,
what usually happens in all
because
the cases.
that is what happens. But in reality, I don't think that that's necessarily what's on their mind. Just the course of actions that happen screw over the families that.
And the expenses that the
Yeah.
families, when
Yeah.
they're trying to make the perpetrators
Right.
better, I guess.
And so by taking that protective stance of the entity, like it doesn't give them the ability to minister to those families that were just harmed, right?
Yeah.
Because they're taking this position like of defensive nature, and that's, you have to open your arms, right? Like you have to go
Mhm.
and fall on your sword. You have to do whatever you can to help these families. And the amount of families that they lost from this incident,
It was a ton of families with kids ended up leaving because of this. Not even just the victims. I mean,
right. So I think that you can probably trace direct people that are not attending church anymore. There's probably 50 people that are no longer
between the
going to
ward
church.
he was in and the ward they moved him to.
Yeah.
Mhm.
And so, and that's significant in order to preserve this one kid attending church. That's kind of odd, right?
Yeah, that's so interesting. I love that perspective, and it makes so much sense that because their hands are tied in this legal way from Salt Lake when they're calling to get help, how do we handle this? Because they have to handle it in such a way, it ends up protecting the perpetrator and excluding the families, like you said, who need help, which is so opposite to what a church should be offering. Rather than saying, hey guys, we messed up and we messed up hard and we want to be accountable and we want to ask your forgiveness. We want to say, I'm so sorry for not reporting this to you guys sooner. We're sorry for allowing him to continue to stay in church. But because they're tied by these legalities from Salt Lake, they have to do the opposite. And just like you said, it's having this effect where people are falling away from the church in droves just because they are protecting the perpetrator, and
Yeah.
it's just so backwards. And I love the way that you put that because it makes sense, and it makes sense why all of these stories are coming out, because people are saying, yeah, me too, yeah, this happened to our family was cut off. Or we had Michael Benjamin here in the chat. Hey Michael, he was on another episode with us. He lost his calling because he was standing up for the victims instead of the perpetrator, and it's just so backwards and confusing as to how that would happen. So I want to talk about what happened to you guys once you did start speaking out, once the email to the 500 plus people was sent, and once they realized you weren't lying. Did they start treating you differently in the ward?
Yeah. So actually,
Well,
there.
I will say one time, the bishop, there was a big meeting in our ward because people had a lot of questions after that email. And the bishop actually did say he was sorry, and he should have told everybody before he went to mutual, like allowed this kid to come to mutual house and run around. He should have done all the stuff. He was so sorry to the families. So he did admit that he did.
Yeah. So after that email, the next Sunday, like 2 days later after
they
that
had
email.
to, because people were all like, what's going on? Like,
Right.
This is crazy. We don't know about this. Why?
So it created this uproar. So he did like the last
the whole like last second hour or whatever.
second hour on like apologizing for what had happened
and explaining a little bit more, I guess, what had happened, I guess.
Yeah. And so that was like a backfire effect of them sending out the email. But then like asking about what happened, one of the things that there's so many dumb things that happened throughout this process, but they were going back and forth. Ashley had talked to a couple of the state presidency members, and because they were going to be doing like a protection training and asking, like trying to make us feel good, like, hey, what could we have done? And so Ashley,
well, they asked us a lot of times, and I was in the prior presidency, so I got the email saying that they were going to have this meeting about everyone had to go listen to some trainings and stuff. And so the two other state presidency members were not as involved in this, but we knew them, and they had been at that meeting and talked to our parents and like cried with our parents. Oh, we're so sorry. We'll do everything we can to help you. We didn't know about the situation. And so I had finally emailed both of the other state presidency members who, acquaintances of our families. Like we know them.
I mean, one of them was a client of
mine. They're close to our families. And I emailed them and I had laid out everything that had gone wrong, everything the state president had said that was a lie. And I think a lot of it, they didn't even know. They had been told wrong information.
Yeah.
And, they had emailed back, thank you for this information. Like, I did not know. And then I saw an email, the stake, I don't even remember what you said. The stake president they had forwarded it to the stake president. And the stake president had responded, like, she's telling you lies and all that stuff. And it was not supposed to get back to me. It got forwarded back. And I was like, I said, I forwarded to Jared. I'm like, look what they just forwarded me. Like, I don't think I was supposed to see this email of him calling me a liar and not to listen to me in these emails.
Yeah, I mean, like his words were a little bit nicer than that, but yes, he was saying that Ashley wasn't telling the truth. But
he wanted to see why we were so mad or something. Right.
But also that they needed to still be kind to us. Like, thanks. So it's like, hey, be kind to the liars, but like. So when I saw that, like that for me was my final straw. So I replied to this and I said, hey, seems like you guys are having some real issues with emails, like Elder Miskin, like, and now you guys. And I was like, but I want you, like, I'm done with this. Like, this is a joke. You guys need to find a new Elders Quorum president. Like, I'm resigning. And so I resigned as Elders Quorum president at that time. And that was hard for me because I was at that point definitely still true believing member / I was experiencing a lot of dissonance, but ultimately, like, resigning from your calling, like, at least to me, was a huge deal.
That is a huge deal.
Yeah. And so that happened, and it wasn't like, it wasn't ambiguous. People knew that I resigned. Like, it was a whole thing. And
we got we were ostracized literally out of that ward. Yeah. People made comments to our kids all the time. Like, that family should be here. Why aren't you letting them come? The perpetrator's dad was principal of the high school most of the kids went to, and he was harassing our kids. And so he got moved to a different job because we just got done with him harassing our kids at school. We're like, the district, can you make this stop? And the next,
well, so then what ends up happening, like, as well, is they end up, it took about 4 or 5 months for them to finally, like, denote, okay, this kid is not coming back. The perpetrator is not coming back to your ward ever. Like, he's no longer going to be able to attend your ward. We literally had to fight tooth and nail to get them to say that. And so as we did that over a 5-month period, finally they assigned him to a new ward. So he starts attending the new ward, and the new ward, some people send out like anonymous letters or whatever that go to that ward to make them aware, because nobody's saying anything.
Because people are concerned. I mean, we're not that far away from the other ward. People know about stuff. And they have a lot of kids in that ward, more kids than anybody around here, any wards down here. And so people are like, hey, why are you moving him to our ward? Like this, we don't want him here. Like,
and so this is another kind of like major misstep that the church did, but also definitely shows where their heart and intent is. And 100% this was orchestrated by Salt Lake. Salt Lake made this call. There's no way they did not, because I've never heard of it before. And that is, they have this, it's not third hour anymore. It's second hour meeting.
All the adults are supposed to be there.
Yeah, with all of the adults in the congregation and the area authority, who is over like 200, 300 congregations, right? So like you don't see this person ever. So now this is a new area authority that had been assigned in the meantime. And so this is the second area authority that's involved in this issue. Just this, with this one little ward. Kind of odd. But he's in attendance in this meeting. The full stake presidency, so those three are in attendance in the meeting, and then also the full bishopric. So you've got seven, like the highest seven.
Pretty legit meeting here.
Yeah.
Like it's
the highest seven people in the area are in this meeting.
You're like Sunday school, basically.
Talking about this situation, and they allow dad of the perpetrator to stand up and give a 5-10 minute like soliloquy on
how he's not really that dangerous. This is all fine. Like,
yeah,
everyone's overreacting.
Yeah, and so he specifically says the phrase that, like, you know, all he did is touch a girl on her chest and on her bottom, like
a 7-year-old. Yeah, the 7-year-old.
The 7-year-old. And so, and he started out by saying that, like, there's lots of misinformation. We've done everything right. Like, we, you know, and, you know, one of the things that I do want to point out here, which I think is part of the systemic problem here, is Elder Miskin's email. He does say that they did everything that they were supposed to do according to the church policies and procedures, talking about the bishop and stake president, right? They called Salt Lake.
Yeah.
In their mind, like when dad gets up and says, we've done everything we're supposed to do, everything we're supposed to do according to who? Like, according to Salt Lake? Yeah, maybe you have.
I mean, the dad, I guess.
Right.
And that's his own.
And it's self-preservation, and we also understand that. But should the perpetrator's dad be given a platform to stand up in front of a new congregation that his kid can be a potential victimizer of, and say, hey, don't worry, he's not that bad. It's not that big a deal. And people are blowing this out of proportion. And here's all that he did, when in reality, he did that. You know, and then to be backed up by the area authority, the stake presidency, and the bishopric, like who's right, who's true? Like, is it us, the angry people, like that maybe are on our way out of the church?
That meeting should never, and it should never have happened. Like, it's ridiculous. I've never heard of that happening before.
And so, like, it's very, very telling as to what they're trying to accomplish.
And we heard about it like 2 days later. We had people like texting us, did you hear about what happened? Like in my ward? Like, and we had no idea.
So after that, I called the bishop of that ward, and I called the stake president to corroborate what I had been told by other people. And it's like, no, that can't be true. They can't have actually let him say that. There has to be more to the story.
They all said, yeah, that's what happened. We let them know it. It's fine.
And so when I confronted the stake president about that, it's like, President, you know that there was much more abuse than just touching on the chest and the bottom.
Yeah, like you heard from the dad what happened.
And he's like, well, do you have a copy of the police report? And I was like, oh.
We actually can't get a copy because he's a minor. So we actually don't know what it says in the police report. We only know what the dad told us.
But
oh
to the
gosh.
Point, he knew we didn't have it. So
right. And so so obviously he knows that. But I'm like, okay, super cool. Like, you know what he confessed to you. Like, you know what dad confessed to you. Like, you know, like what all the allegations are. And to allow somebody to get up there and just tell one side of a story.
It's not even appropriate for a church meeting anyways. Like, that shouldn't be happening. But they had lots of families leave that ward because of that meeting as well, the new ward.
But the goal of the church in this scenario is to keep everybody comfy, keep everybody in the boat, and make sure that this family could continue to attend. And not only, it's not just about continuing to have them attend, it's more important to make sure that everybody knows that all of the decisions that are being made are good ones and they come from God and they're being thought out and there's revelation involved. All of those things are important. And so they just keep doubling down. Well, those are the facts.
Hold on. Can I jump in here? I'm
Yeah,
like
please.
fuming. There's just so much. There's so much to unravel. This is highly irresponsible of these adults. I mean, not only do they not alert people in the original ward of what's going on, hey, just so you know, this is what's going on with this child. He has multiple victims. They're all very young. Please keep an eye on your children because we're still going to let them come to church. Like, if that's what they're wanting to do, they should at least tell the parents, be aware of this situation. So they don't do any of that. They just move him to a ward with more kids and then say, but don't worry, guys, it really wasn't anything. These people over here are blowing it out of proportion. What? It's just, I mean, I have never ran a church before, but I feel like I could do a better job. I feel like sending an email to this new ward saying, this is the new family who has just moved in. This is his history. We just want you to be aware. It could easily be an email. And they could even say what happened in the police report. There doesn't have to be speculation or whatever. It's here are the facts. Please be informed. This is who's coming to your church. But they're actively protecting this abuser. Now, granted, he is a minor.
Right.
And, you know, he's a kid and he's trying to go to church. I understand that. But, I mean, getting help for the child, the perpetrator, is a whole other story, which I'm sure we don't have a whole lot of information on. He should be getting help. He should be in therapy. That's not to say he doesn't deserve church. Give him the stream, you know, let him zoom in to church. Get him the help that he needs first.
I guess they could, even if they didn't want to release his name, they could just say, hey, this is what's going on. There's somebody in our ward. Keep an eye on your kids.
Yeah, I don't know. I feel like it is important to name him, but that's just my opinion, and it could be wrong. But I feel like it's
so I do understand it's different than having like a grown man that you know. I don't know.
Sure.
It is tricky.
Look, here's the complication to that, and it's because it's not about minor or not minor.
Well, they should be taking care of it themselves by not having him there and not having to. But.
So this is the way that it's dealt with all of the time, though. Like every time that there's a confession, people in the ward do not know about it unless they find out about it.
We've heard so many stories after coming public. People are like everyone, this has happened to me. Like I confessed, and now everybody. Well, no one knows, and he's been calling the bishop or
the new ward we moved to. Like that was the case in the new ward that we moved to, right? Mm-hmm. So that's the issue. Is like there was a perpetrator that was in the new ward that wasn't disclosed to us when we moved there.
Yeah, so we had enough of our ward and people not treating us nicely. There was at the time, no thought of not going to church, really, Mm-hmm. And so we ended up moving our records to a couple wards over. They let us do that, very
How kind.
And a few months in, somebody tips off one of our kids that there is a guy in our ward who has done some stuff, and
his records were annotated.
Yes, but he's in the Elders Quorum Presidency, and this guy's always been would turn around and talk to my little kid during soccer meeting, like, "Oh, do you want to color with me?" And
wait, hold on. Yeah. Let me make sure I'm understanding. So you moved to a new ward, and there's another sex offender grown man in the leadership position in that ward?
Correct. And he's actually a former bishop.
He was bishop a few years ago, apparently, and his abuse happened a while ago with a family member, and they never had prosecuted, apparently, but when he became bishop, they had contacted the church and they released him immediately.
And, I was going to say, they put him in as bishop? Oh,
he's not bishop. So we're new to the ward, so we don't know anything that's happened in the last few years. And we find out about this, and right away we contact the bishop, and we're like, is this true? Like, because some kid told my kid, and I want to make sure I don't overreact before
Yeah.
and the bishop actually came to our house. He was apologetic. He told us what happened. His records were annotated.
And so he wasn't allowed to work with the youth.
But that just means you don't have an official calling with youth. After I found out about this, I play the piano in primary. He was leading the music in primary as a substitute. Like, when you're a primary teacher, you ask, like, hey, are you allowed to come substitute in primary? No, you ask whoever is going to do it. So he was driving youth. He probably still is. I mean, like,
oh, for sure.
Like, so, like, just because you don't have an official calling with the youth doesn't mean you're not, if no one knows
around them.
Well, and also, like, to Michael Benjamin, like, absolutely the elders quorum president in that situation, like, because he had that position of authority, even though it wasn't over youth, like, he had access to the children.
And everyone trusted him.
And so, that being said, like, what we found out as we went on Mormon Stories and we've gone on some of these different things, like, we've had lots of people reach out to us that I knew personally. Like, and this scenario has not just played out in our lives, but it's played out in tens of people that we know personally in their lives.
And even, like, literally in the state we live in, like, people have contacted us. Like, every ward has some creeper that no one knows about, except for, like, a couple of people.
Yep. And so, yeah, when only the leaders know about it, like, it's a problem. It's non-consensual to the people that are attending that ward to have somebody that they're going into this building that they have a high level of trust. Like,
and you just have, like, average people teaching your kids. And primary, you're walking around with, like, you send your kids to primary, like it's just random people. Like, they're not going to watch your kids like a hawk necessarily. Like, anyone can,
because you think it's a safe space.
Yeah. Well, and here's the thing. When the day, like 2 days or the day before we were on Mormon Stories, the largest award ever was given in a California lawsuit against a sexual abuser in a civil case from a Mormon church, like parishioner or whatever, like member, had confessed to his bishop. This was in Lake Elsinore. And basically this perpetrator had been abusing his stepdaughter for years. Bishop knew about it the whole time. And the church was named in the lawsuit. So was the mom. And then the stepdad. So those were the three in the suit. Mom settled out for $200,000. Church settled out for $1 million. And then dad or stepdad didn't settle out because he didn't have an attorney, didn't have any money, whatever. And so they awarded the victim in this $2.38 billion. Yeah. So biggest award ever. And turns out that dude is in my brother's ward. Like, the perpetrator.
Like, in our stake.
Yeah.
He's like, oh yeah, I know that guy.
Oh my gosh.
He was in Elders Quorum Presidency and stuff too after
he was in an Elders Quorum Presidency with my brother. Like, and my brother only found out about that when he got into the bishopric. And then they're like, oh yeah. By the way, this dude's had a little problem in his past. And so that was like 10 years ago that my brother was in the bishopric with him. And so, but I currently have brothers that attend the ward with this dude that just had that $2.38 billion judgment against him for abuse. So, like, they are—
It's not isolated. It's all over.
They are in every ward. And so it's insanity to me but the people that are attending that ward, besides my brother, most of them don't even know that this guy is a perpetrator.
Even though it was a big story like a couple months ago, like, they don't even know they're seeing that guy every week.
And so, but the point is here, like, the way that the system operates within the church, there's a reason for the Megan's Law database, right? Like, we believe as a society there's some sort of social contract that we feel like we should be protecting people from sexual abusers. That's what our society believes. So cool. Why don't we believe that in the church? Why don't we believe that that's important? Like, they say that they have the gold standard. What a joke. Like, what?
Yeah.
The gold standard? Like, yeah, I mean, just like the gold plates, like, come on, BS. Like,
Oh my gosh. The gold plates.
and they just have to make everything gold, right?
Yeah,
So
everything's gold.
yeah, so I just, to me, like, the system that they have created is broken, and it does protect the church. It does protect the abuser. Whether I, like Kobe said, I don't necessarily think that these are like misering men that are like, oh yeah, let's, like, let's see how many people we can harm. I don't think that. Like, that's not real. Like, let's pinch every penny. I do think that they care about the money. I don't think that's a thing. I think that they care about making sure that everybody feels warm and cozy attending church. And
Mhm.
if people knew who the abusers were in the church, they would not show up. Reasonable people would choose not to take their children to church if they knew how many abusers were in their ward. They
Yeah.
wouldn't. And you've you've got the option to keep everybody quiet when that kind of stuff happens, or you've got the option of expelling the people.
We might run out of people to have callings, I guess.
Well, that's real too.
Yeah. And that's the tricky thing, because do I think that these perpetrators should be going to church and be around children? No. But also, I can understand that church is for people who want to go and get right with God and who do want to repent and all of that. So it's like a weird place to be in, but I think
Sure.
at the very least, at the very very least, do not put these people in positions of power. So being part of the elders quorum president, if you're unfamiliar with Mormonism, is a big deal. Don't put them in those positions where people look up to them and trust them even more than they already do just because they're Mormon. So don't give them that extra power. They don't need it. Okay. We can give that to other people. But I see what you're saying is if they stop giving callings to people who have a past, they would have nobody to run their church because it's all volunteer based. You don't have people who are training tens of years or whatever to become a preacher and to understand how to take care of these wards. It's just regular people who are called, apparently, of God to do these things. And so I think it probably gets tricky in areas where you don't have enough people to run the church, but still, you need to protect the kids. You need to protect the people who are in the ward. You have a duty to protect these people, especially as a church. So there's just a lot of layers here. And we have some questions because I know we're just about at the hour here. I want to know how you guys eventually transitioned out, maybe what that was like, and how your family's doing now.
Yeah, so I'll pick that up. Um, I this started creating major dissonance for me. Now, one of the things that is talked about a little bit in the article, we talk about a lot in Mormon stories, is my experience. I was abused as a 7-year-old by a 17-year-old in our
Mm,
congregation, and nothing happened on that, like with law enforcement. And to me, like at the time, I didn't even realize, like, as I'm even coming into my teenage years and dealing with this, and it's all acknowledged. Um, but like, this was a trigger for me as like, wait, hold on, this is what happened to me. Like, this happened to
yeah.
me. And so this pushed me to say, okay, what's going on? Like, how is this from God? And then figuring out that the church is protecting itself and lying and all of these different things, I'm like, wait, hold on. If they're lying about this, what else are they lying about? And so, and also, as I'm dealing with the social implications in the church and feeling so much anger towards my leaders and, um, the ward members and things like that are treating my family poorly, like, it's all of that's going on. I'm like, hey, if I'm going to keep doing this, like, I want to resolve some of my concerns. And
Mhm.
I always have problems with polygamy. I always have problems with lots of different things in the church. but I always just shut those things up. I'm like, no, God's going to tell me when I get up there. Like, that's when I'm going to figure all that out, because I feel good when I do this or hear that. And so I know it's true. Well, I go through the church resources to start looking at what my problems are, like trying to solve those concerns for myself so I can double down. And as I do that, I'm like, whoa, hold on. This feels a lot like the explanations that I'm getting over here. It feels like I'm being gaslit. Right?
Yes.
And so you go and read the gospel topics essays, you read the apologies that the church offers, and they don't gel and they don't feel good or right, or also are not what they've been telling you in general your whole life. And so over a period of time, I finally came to the point, it was April of not this year, but last year, that I finally, like, the final straw broke for me. And I was like, okay, this isn't true. I know it's not true. They are lying to me about all this stuff. All of the evidence kind of finally stacked up. And it took me a long time to get there. And then I was like, okay, well, cool. Maybe I still can find some truth within the church, and still attended as like physically in, but mentally out for a little while. And then eventually, like, I came across the CES letter after that, and started looking into other resources after a little while. And it's like, okay, this is not okay. And I do know how it's made up and why it's made up, and I'm not okay with it. And so I decided to stop attending. And, you know, and that looked like a lot of angst in our relationship surrounding this issue, surrounding the church and what's good for our family and all of that. And it took a little while for both of us to kind of work through our own processes, and so much pain surrounding that. Like, that oftentimes people like to diminish what someone's testimony or commitment to the church was when they leave.
Yeah.
And they can do that if they want, but like the people that are close to us know that that was not our process. Like, it wasn't that we weren't in, we were fully in. Like, we, you know, when the church leaders would ask us to jump, we'd say how high, right? Like,
And
we,
giving money to the church, good
yeah,
amounts of money and tithing.
yeah. I
And we
mean,
donated extra for anything they needed. We did.
yeah. Well, and I mean, we were holding church at our house. 100 people would show up to our house.
And during COVID,
we have been financially privileged and grateful to be in that position, but also, like, we strove to be extra generous, like, as much as we could, and we donated lots of stuff and time. And unfortunately, the church has a significant amount of money that came from us, and we don't love that. At this point, knowing what they do with their finances, and you know, they use their finances to pay attorneys, to gaslight people,
Right.
you know, and to defend themselves and to pay out settlements, and that's really all they use it for. I mean, that's an overstatement, but the bottom line is, like, it was very emotionally difficult for us. So that was my path. And then, I mean, Ashley can tell you.
Yeah, I'm a little more gradual than Jared is.
Just in life, right?
And it took me, I still attended with the kids for a while longer, 6 months. I don't remember the time frame now. But I mean, after finding that out about the new ward, like, that was like the first time where I ever was like really considered not going to church.
You told me something the other day that I think is interesting for this.
I think that my thought process was like, even if all of this is true, God would still understand if I stop bringing my kids to church.
Sure.
So, and I mean, at that time too, after that, I had started, my daughter, she was in primary, and I would go hang out outside her door to make sure she didn't run off or someone didn't come in there. And then it's like, this is crazy. Like, you know.
I mean,
yeah, you're trying to protect your kids.
And then, I mean, then there's other things. My thing is more safety. The doctrinal stuff is not as big of a deal, but it's not like my main goal. Then you get into, like, you know, bishops' interviews with kids. We hear all these stories of bishops being super inappropriate. I mean, we had that as a married couple. We had bishops saying inappropriate things to us. I mean, we heard so many stories. I mean, yeah, like I don't want my kids to have to do that. I mean, we already had issues with that with one of our kids, and so I just decided at this point, no, we'll just be done.
Yeah.
And it wasn't at that point socially that hard because we'd already really been ostracized from the whole abuse incidents anyways, and we moved to a new ward and no one really cared that much about us, which is fine. We hadn't been there that long. I wasn't like offended or anything, but it wasn't like we were all of a sudden like fully attending huddle callings and just left one day. Like,
yeah.
We already got ostracized. We already had like not hardly any friends at church anymore. So we just, just kind of slowly stopped doing it.
Yeah, and for context on like what it meant to leave our ward too, like this is the ward that I grew up in, right?
Both
like,
our parents,
wow.
we had siblings in that ward.
I had served in 2 bishoprics in this ward. I was the elders quorum president. Like, my business is a social business. So like, I would say 70% of my business came from LDS people.
You moved in a lot of people in that ward.
Yeah. Oh, and so that's true. Probably 15 families that were in that ward were because I brought them into the ward.
And both our parents are still in that ward.
Yeah. So both of our parents, her dad had been a bishop. My dad had been a bishop. My dad was in the state presidency very recently. And so like and I have 5 siblings that were all, besides one, were all active members of the church until in the last 4 or 5 years. And so like we were a big deal in the stake as far as like having our roots planted, and being involved in leadership and stuff. So,
and we have 6 kids, all the stuff.
And so we had just planted roots. 2019, we moved into this dream home that we built in my ward that we grew up in. We had moved like 7 families in within half a mile of us.
Our friends. And
like family. That are our friends and family members.
Most of them don't go to church now either, so I guess.
Yeah. So, but the point is like, it was a big loss for us to be like uprooted from our community.
Yeah.
Like the church was 5 days a week of our life. 5 days a week we were involved somehow in the church, some way, shape, or form. So like to say that the church was our life is no understatement. Like probably 15% of our income was going to the church. The time contribution that was going to the church, like when I monetize my time contribution, that's actually much more valuable than, but what was even more hard for me, at least, is my mind share to the church. Like the portion of my daily, like living that went to like the church was high. Like it was a very high percentage of my thoughts that were informed like by what the church wanted and what the church wanted for me. And when I went through the temple and they talked about consecration, all your time, talents, like financial resources or anything with which the Lord has blessed you, or whatever the exact phrasing is, like I took that very literally. And so if my bishop called me up and he's like, hey, man, I know you only have 500 grand in the bank or whatever that number was at the time, but I need 250 because so-and-so, like I would cut the check. And I kid you not, like I would cut the check because in my mind, I was like, no, God is asking me for this. That is super, and what an honor it would be for me to cut that check. Like what an honor.
Wow, I'm so glad that you're bringing all of this up because a lot of people don't understand how Mormonism is like a cult, how it's a high demand group, but you laid it out so perfectly. It's your time, your energy, your finances, your headspace, everything that's going on in your mind, your thoughts. You are bringing your kids into this. It's a lot. It's a lot of work to be an upstanding Mormon in the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. And so when you leave, it's such a big deal because so much of your structure, your social structure, your identity collapses. And people don't tend to understand that because from the outside, Mormonism just looks so happy and neat and like, oh, look, they're a little Mormon family and they're so cute. They don't realize what's going on underneath and how much you are contributing in all of the ways we just mentioned. So when you left, was it like, I mean, I know what it's like from my perspective, but give everyone else a perspective of what it's like once you separate yourself from that kind of society.
Well, we had a traumatic experience just recently that, I mean, I'd like to talk about.
Sure.
Um, our oldest daughter just got married.
Okay.
And, Ashley got her temple recommend a while back.
Earlier this year.
Right. When like she was still in a different space, but she was not attending. Um, and so as our daughter got married a month and a half ago, like
I did this in preparation. She'd been dating a couple guys, and I knew it was a possibility that she would end up getting married in the next couple years. So
And she is still active.
yes.
Is
So
that
just in
why?
case, I
Okay.
was like, I'll go renew my temple recommend. I didn't lie. I was very straightforward with them. I think they just didn't want to piss me off, so they gave me a temple.
Okay.
so that being said, like we're thinking, okay, it's fine. I'm not going to go. I'm not a member anymore. Like I removed my records from the church, right? Which was
Okay.
also, it felt freeing. It also like was a little bit hard. So I
Mhm.
did that. And so I knew that I couldn't attend, which was hard to know that my daughter was going to get married and I wouldn't be there. But then like Ashley was just planning on attending. Well, she got asked by my daughter and her husband not to attend the wedding in the temple because it would be disrespectful, right? Like because they knew
Oh.
that she didn't like have that full belief anymore. And I do not lay that at the feet of my daughter or her husband. Like I don't, and that's hard. They're young. They someday they will figure out how painful that was to Ashley and to
How
me,
unnecessary that was.
and unnecessary, right? But
Yeah.
like the cost of like becoming disenfranchised with the church is high. Like not being able to attend your daughter's wedding, that's crazy.
And we're kind of like, it sucks because we're like the bad guys who aren't there when people have no idea like what we've done leading up to
Right,
it.
the kind of parents that you are.
Yeah. And so like, and so as we look at this, like the cost of our familiar relationships, like in the relationships with Ashley's parents is definitely strained. My parents have been there. I'm not going to say there's zero strain, but my parents have been through this a little bit more. They've had multiple children leave the church. And so they've been very kind and understanding. But this is hard for Ashley's parents.
And now, both of our siblings are now out, and it was a catalyst. This was a catalyst for all of it. So, in the last couple of years,
so there are 9 siblings within the family. So I've got 5, and Ashley has 3. And now, like in full attendance, there's only 1. And then there's another family that attends partially and has like some different like nuance and whatnot. But it's been an issue for many of them. And we do not take credit to say that we specifically had anything to do with that. But this issue brought to light for a lot of
it does make you think about lots of other
like
things.
what are we doing?
Yeah.
And why are these things happening? And so what does this mean for our children and all of those things? And so it was very difficult and it was a major loss and has been very traumatic for our family. However, I will say that there has been major light at the end of the tunnel for us on this. Like in general, for me, my daily living is better. I feel so much better outside of the church than I ever did inside the church from a perspective of when I talk about mind share. I felt a piece of crap all the time in the church. It was broken and needed to be fixed because that was all the messaging that I ever received. but don't worry, we're so glad that you're here so that we can help fix you. Like, that's really the creepy message that gets delivered to you all the time in the
Yep.
church. Like, don't worry, like your carnal man will be fixed through the church. Awesome. So I don't feel that way about myself anymore. But also, like, we have multiple children that have felt somewhere in that kind of vein or have never resonated with the church's message. And so for them not attending, like, it's lovely. Like, they're like,
no
wait.
loss for them.
They're like, wait, on Sunday we get to go and do brunch, or we get to like go to the movies or go to Disneyland. This is amazing.
On Sunday, yeah.
Yeah, like this is so
We have
cool.
options.
Yeah. And so like, so that's been good, at least for me. It has been an issue, like for our oldest child, like where it's hard for her because we taught her one way her whole life.
Right.
She was in high school when all this kind of started, so that's, you know.
And it's so hard and confusing. And so, but I mean, Ashley can speak to her experience.
Yeah, no, I don't really have anything else to.
And so, but that, I mean, so that's kind of how it's been for our family. And so, yes, like, it's been hard, but we do feel glad. And we also, it's been amazing to be able to look at information and look at it neutrally and be like, hey,
right,
this could be true, this could not be true. And also it doesn't matter. Like, there's not necessarily,
and we won't ever know that.
Right. But we don't have to have some specific agenda. We don't have to discriminate against one piece of information over another based off of, like, is it what the church agrees with or not? I don't care what the church agrees with at all anymore, or what anybody else agrees with. I get to look at information and corroborate it for myself, and I get to vet it for myself and say, oh yeah, no, that seems right. And I don't have to discriminate against any piece of information based off of whether it agrees with or disagrees with what any institution has told me that I should or shouldn't believe.
Yes, that is the individual sovereignty we talk about. That is the consciousness, making your own decisions, being aware of yourself, what you want, your wants, needs, everything that you want your life to be. You get to decide, you get to design it and create it and say, what are my morals now? Of course, you're still going to have some. A lot of people, especially in the Mormon church, are like, well, once you leave, how are you going to just be a good person? How are you going to know how to be a good person? I don't know, because it seems like normal common sense to be a good person. It doesn't mean that you drop all the values. I'm sure you still keep some of the values, the honesty, the integrity, everything that they teach you, and some, but it's not limited to their parameters anymore. You get to decide who you want to extend that kindness to, which there are, I mean, I guess I can't say that they block kindness, block you from giving kindness to certain people, but they do discriminate against certain people. You know, we accept gay people, but you can't be gay, you can't act on it. Like, we love you, but we're not going to have you over. Like, all this stuff is so contradicting, and now you can choose what feels right to you and have a broader sense of love and unconditional love. Because that's another thing. It's very conditional love within the church. We'll love you if you repent. We'll love you if you do this, if you do that. Now you can just take a deep breath and do whatever you want, and that's amazing. And before we go, Donnell wants to know how your little angel is doing. Is she okay? Is she doing well?
Yeah. You know, one of the things that actually got the perpetrator's dad moved from the school was they wrote us multiple letters saying, like, hey, your daughter was so young, like, they'll likely never even know that anything happened.
So
right?
Why are you guys making such a big deal?
Why are you making such a big deal out of this?
To us and the other victims.
Put it in writing. So that's super easy to show to the district and be like, hey, here.
And he was already bugging our kids at school.
Yikes.
Harassing our kids at school.
Yeah. But that being said, like, my point to that is this, like,
we don't know.
We don't know the answer to that. With abuse, there's a book that we like, and it's called, I believe it's called The Body Keeps Count.
The body keeps the score.
Keeps the score. And yeah, sorry. And but the point to that is, like, we don't know what she ever will know or will not know. her body knows. And
Yeah.
so she is doing well, she is thriving, and we have reached out to counselors and done all the things that we can do.
She didn't come to live with us until she was almost 3.
Wow.
We adopted her from foster care when she was 3.
Oh,
So
okay.
she was almost 2 when we got
No,
her.
she was almost 3 when we got
Almost
her.
3. Okay.
We
So
got her during COVID.
right. And so, but that being said, so she is doing well, and we have taken all the steps that we can to help her. But more important to us, like, is what steps can we take when she does become more aware of what has gone on in her life?
Yeah, because we just can't know
Right.
what she knows or what even happened. We don't know if he told us
Right.
what happened.
And so
Yeah.
that being said, when she does become more aware, like, of what has gone down, like, we want to be able to show up and say, yeah, you know what? Here's what we did when we found out. Like, we showed up.
Yeah, because we've heard people, like, when they got older, like, talking to their parents, and it's like, hey, what did you do when you found out? And we want her to know, hey, we blew up everything for you.
Yeah.
So.
And
Yeah.
that was really important to us. I wanted to show up when I figured this out, and I said this to you yesterday, but I wanted to show up for 7-year-old Jared. Like, I wanted to show up for our daughter the way that I wanted my parents to show up for me. And I am not putting blame on my parents at all. They are amazing. They did what they thought they were supposed to do at the time. But
and
now,
listen to their church leader.
Now, being a victim that's 41 years old when I was 7, like, I want to look back and say, what should have happened for me? That's what we are doing here. And Ashley and I were so on board, like, with each other. And we do not receive the church and the doctrine and all the things the same way exactly, but we definitely showed up the same way in this. And it's like, we will blow shit up. We will do what we have to do. Like,
I just got chills.
and so that's the way that we've shown up in this. And lots of people can hate us. I've lost business, whatever. Like, fine. It's okay. Like, but what we can do is show up for our child. What we can do is show up for other victims and do what's right. And that's why we're here tonight talking to you. Like, it is so much easier to crawl under a shell and be like, oh, okay, we did something. It's fine. It is much better for us to shine light on these things so that at some point, some person has a better life and has a better experience because maybe this is like one little tiny drop in the bucket. We know that. We know that our story is one small story amongst thousands. But as we continue dropping in this bucket, at some point it overflows and it puts out the church's fire, right? Like, and they finally have to step up and they finally have to do the right thing because enough people say me too. Enough people stand up.
Yeah, it seems like that's the only time when change is affected, when enough people stand up and taint their pretty little name that they hold so dear, because that's the only time. And we've seen this throughout all the cases we've been covering this whole week, and we're interviewing Chelsea Goodrich tomorrow, talking more in depth about her case. But if you don't shed light on it, they won't do anything because they would rather protect their image. So if you tarnish their image enough, eventually they're going to have to make a change. And I talked about this with Colby last night. I don't know why they haven't done it sooner and just implemented better practices, but who knows? That's a topic for another day. But thank you guys so much for being willing to be those people to stand up and fight and talk about your story, because it is difficult. And this is your child that we're talking about. It's not easy, and you have lost so much. You've gained so much, but there is a cost to doing this. And so I just want to thank you from me, Jonathan, and I think it's safe to say everyone watching, thanks you for coming out and sharing your story.
Yeah, thank you for having us on.
Yeah. Wow, this was so great. And we've gone for almost an hour and a half. I didn't expect that. I mean, I should have, because there was so much to cover. But thank you for your time. Do you have any other thoughts before we wrap up?
You know, I really like what Colby said last night, talking about, like, hey, what can we do? we have not actually dove into this much yet, because like we just been processing like with a fire hose to our face, right? But you can reach out to local lawmakers. The laws do need to change. Like that is what we can do. We can
Yeah.
change things by being loud voices, by being advocates for mandated reporting. Um, what's more important than that in my mind is we need to push the church to have consent, like for families that are attending knowing that there are perpetrators in their ward and they need to be labeled. And so the cost of coming to church after being an abuser can be, it is shame, right? Like that's fine. I'm not saying we need to publicly shame everybody for the purpose of shaming them. No, but we need to label the perpetrators, and each new family that comes into the ward needs to know that there's a proverbial scarlet letter on that person.
And honestly, it's so sad. There's wards that like a couple people know about this, but they don't tell anybody.
And so, and by the way, those people that do know about the perpetrators within the ward, like that does, like whatever privilege there was there, that's gone, right? So the point is, like, we need to push for change. If you stand within the Mormon church, like if you are an active attending Mormon person, like make sure that you write to Salt Lake, because your local leaders, they can't do anything. They can do crap.
Yeah.
The church acts from the top down, right? Like that's how it works. So push for change that way. Don't listen to what Elder Corbett said. Become an advocate. Like stand up and actually take accountability. Don't just try to do this in your ward level, because it's happening in every ward. And so we can push for change as we are pushing for change outside of the church. And honestly, I think that's the change that matters the most, because we are in a system where we don't care. The Strengthening the Church Committee knows about Ashley. I'm 100% sure. By the way, our stake president, his uncle sits at the head of that committee, right? So that's an odd thing. So Ashley getting flagged. But push for change, like we can do that. So yes, with our state leaders, like our whatever state you live in, but also with our LDS leaders, like push for change in Salt Lake. I remember at the beginning of this, I told my business partner, I was like, look, I would cut $100,000 check to the church right now if they would give me an hour with the prophet, just so I could talk to him about this, because I'm positive that he's not aware.
Like if he knew about this and how this is really going down.
That's what I thought at the very beginning. And I literally, my business partner's family has some connections to the prophet. And so I was like, no, like, and then the more that I learned about this, I figured out, no, the prophet knows exactly what's going on.
Yeah.
And so that was the sickening part. But they will only be shamed into this. It will not be out of empathy that they make changes. It will be through shame. And I hate that, but we got to do that. So yeah, raise awareness, share stories like this, and talk to your state senators, talk to the people that can affect change in your local governments.
Yeah. The shame thing is ironic, because that's their tactic to keep people in. And now we're flipping the script. It's time that they feel ashamed for something.
But thank you so much for having us on. We so appreciate it.
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you. And all right. So I guess that's it. We can wrap it up. We have some people asking about Oscar. He's laying right behind me on the couch, so I'm not gonna bug him. Oh, he might come over in a second. Oh, here he comes. Oh, to end on a little bit of a lighter note, here's my wiener, our little mascot. Thank you, everyone, for tuning in. If you want to support the podcast, you can get some of our merch. We have some Apostates Unite t-shirts over at cultstoconsciousness.com under the merch tab. You can become a patron if you'd like to do that at patreon.com/cultstoconsciousness. You can come to Costa Rica with us. We have 9 spots left. We just had 2 more spots booked yesterday. a really exciting couple. I don't know if I'm allowed to say who yet, so I will keep them anonymous. But we're really excited to hang out with you guys. And I think that's it. Thank you for watching. And until next time, follow your highest excitement, be conscious, and be well.
Thank you.
Bye, guys.